This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to the alphabet of my favourite films, the letter Q. Now, as you might expect, this is going to be quite a short video, but again, leave your comments below and leave your favourite films beginning with the letter Q, because no doubt there'll be ones I've forgotten or ones that I have never seen. So I'd be interested to see your Q list of favourite films, because it's obviously not a letter that you would think has many films, but it probably does in different languages, French for example. So I'll just start this off, and this probably will be under 10 minutes, which you'll be glad to know. The first is Quai des Orfèvres by Henri-Georges Clouzot. This is one of his early films. This is after he did Le Corbeau, and he was kind of not blacklisted, but certainly wasn't very popular for a while because of what Le Corbeau was about, or The Raven. So he came back and he made Quai des Orfèvres, which pronunciation will change every time I say it. This is a really nice print from Studio Canal. As with all of Clouzot's films, it's a bit of a slow burn. It's about jealousy and murder set on the backdrop of the French music halls, and it does star Bernard Blier before he became a director, and he plays one of the leads who is very jealous of his wife, who's a showgirl, and it gets to the point where he is insane almost with jealousy. She goes to see an agent at night at his house. The agent somehow ends up dead, and it then becomes a bit of a police procedural, which is really well done, really well framed, until the truth comes out, which obviously I'm not going to tell you. Again, it's 127 minutes. Sorry, it's only 107 minutes, but it seems a little bit longer. The first half of the film could perhaps had a little bit of judicious editing, but once it gets going, it's another really good Clouzot film. Again, he spent time at the local police station watching how the police officers interrogated suspects. Obviously this was the 40s, post-war, so their methods are a little bit different than what they are today. There's just so many lovely moments. It's, as with most of Clouzot's work, it's quite dark. It gets into the human mind as far as jealousy, what that does to a person, how irrational people can become. But strangely enough, it almost ends on a positive note, which again is really strange for a Clouzot film. But it almost kind of ends on a positive note, which is really strange. It's set around Christmas, so technically it is a Christmas film, if for those of you keeping score on Christmas films. yeah, I wouldn't say it's among his best, but it's certainly well worth a look. Because it has all the Clouseau trademarks, and it's got a really good performance by Bernard Blier. Because really the only other film that I can think of that I've seen him in is Buffet Foire, near the end of his career. Yeah, well worth checking out. Quai des Offers. Apologies to Ben for the pronunciation. Next is a New Zealand film, The Quiet Earth. This is the Arrow release. Again, when you don't have a budget, an end of the world apocalypse film can be quite handy, because this only has a cast of 3. A man played by Bruno Lawrence wakes up and everybody else in the world is gone, hence the Quiet Earth. So he wanders about for a while and then meets a couple of other characters, a man and a woman, and how their relationships change and switch is really well done. It's a really well written film. It holds your interest despite the fact, it's only 3 people, and for a lot of the film it's actually only 1 person. But it's so well done and so well written on not a lot of budget. It still manages to keep your attention. And then when the truth kind of comes out, when they realise why they have survived, it's really clever, well thought out, and kind of believable. It's a really beautiful little film and a perfect example of, if you don't have a lot of money, if you have a really good idea, well written, well played by actors, even if you've only got 3 of them, it can still make an engrossing and riveting film, and that's exactly what The Quiet Earth is. A perfect example of, if you're thinking of making a low budget film yourself and you don't have a lot of money and you don't have a huge cast, it's kind of a really good example of how to do it. Next is Kim Ji-woon's debut, The Quiet Family, which has been featured on this channel quite a lot. I did a double take of this and Happiness of the Katakuris by Takashi Miike, because it's essentially the same story but just handled slightly differently. Takashi Miike's is handled in a Takashi Miike way, and Kim Ji-woon kind of just goes for a fairly straightforward black comedy. Early performances by Kang Ho and Choi Min-sik. It's a wonderful little film, as good as The Happiness of the Katakuris, but just different. And this is the Nova Media release, which I just kind of briefly showed in my updated video, my Asian collection imports. So again, with Nova Media, you get cards. It's the moving story of a family whose patriarch has decided to open essentially a bed and breakfast in the hills and have his entire family as employees, and customers just don't turn up. And then eventually when they do, things happen, they spiral out of control, and it goes into full-blooded farce almost. But again, with most Korean cinema, certainly with the cinema of Kim Ji-woon, the characters are just so well written, so well drawn. so well acted that you root for the characters, even if they may get slightly carried away and do unpleasant things. There's always a reason for it. You can almost see their justification for it. It's just a wonderful film. For years, I wasn't even aware of it. I didn't realise that Happiness of the Katakuris was actually a remake of The Quiet Family. But when I finally saw The Quiet Family, first time I saw it was on a terrible print on DVD, and I couldn't actually watch it. I ended up switching it off halfway through just because the subtitles were terrible. It was really dark and murky. You couldn't actually see what was going on. So when I found out through A Touch of Film, check out his channel, by the way. It's excellent for Asian cinema. When I found out that Nova Media had a copy on Blu-ray, because it's still not... This is Region A, because it's still not available in Region B on Blu-ray, which is quite sad. I jumped at the chance and you can actually see it in its full glory. You can actually see what's going on. You can actually see... That's actually Choi Min-sik. Yeah, Quiet Family, I would highly recommend it. And watch it as a double bill with Takashi Miike's The Happiness of the Katakuris if you want a really enjoyable evening. And then last on the list is Robert Redford's Quiz Show. Again, this is very much like Michael Mann's The Insider. It's a film where there's pretty much no action. It's all talk, but it's absolutely riveting. I just absolutely love Quiz Show. I still think The Milagro Beanfield War is Robert Redford's best film. I love that film as well. Not just because Christopher Walken's in it, honest. But Quiz Show is just a great film. Ralph Fiennes gives a wonderful turn as the rich boy that is caught in the Quiz Show cheating scandal. John Turturro is wonderful as the poor schlob who, when he said, there's cheating going on, everybody ignored him. When he was winning, he wasn't as popular as the rich guy winning. Rob Morrow as the kind of the reporter, not reporter, but the guy from the Senate hearings or some government department. Oh yeah, I know it so well, I can't actually remember what Rob Morrow's job is. You could argue he's a little, not miscast, but his accent's quite bad. He goes for a thick Boston accent that really belongs in The Departed. It's not quite The Departed level of horrendous Boston accents, but it's halfway there. Paul Scofield as Ralph Fiennes' dad gives great support as when he finally realises or finally finds out that his son's actually a cheat. David Paymer is really good as one of the guys who kind of arranges, because it's like they start with him saying, we know that you know the answers, but we're just going to give you the answers in advance, so it's not cheating, you already know the answers, we're just going to give you them. Written by Paul Attanasio, who wrote for Homicide: Life in the Street. It's a really good film, but again, nothing really happens. It's just we follow the journey of this rich guy who has everything, has got a famous family name, and he chooses to tarnish that for fame and money. But again, in the end, it shows the way the world works, because he doesn't really get blamed for it. It's the TV show and the kind of monster that TV has become and the corporations behind the TV that get blamed for it. Martin Scorsese turns up in arguably his best acting performance as one of the kind of CEOs of one of the sponsors of the show, and he's claiming, you know, he didn't put any pressure on anybody to do anything. But it's another perfect example of how money corrupts everything, and it doesn't matter whether it's even a little quiz show. So, quiz show. If you're a Ralph Fiennes fan, you'll probably already have it. If you're not, I would recommend watching it. It might be, again, very much like Michael Mann's Insider. It's kind of a dry subject, and you would think, I'm not really going to be interested in this. But for me, it does kind of hook you, and you just kind of want to follow it through. And looking on the back of the Blu-ray, Richard Dreyfuss was one of the executive producers. There you go. So that is my films for the letter Q. Please let me know in the comments your favourite films beginning with the letter Q, because I'd be, like I said, I'd be fascinated to know what films are out there beginning with Q. And hopefully we'll see you again for the letter R, which I think might be a longer video than Q. Call it Women's Intuition. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solid Your Own Films, and hopefully we'll see you again. Farewell.